All right, today we're diving into one of the absolute weirdest nerves in the entire human body, the accessory nerve. It's responsible for some of the most common things we do every day, but believe me, its design is anything but simple.
I mean, think about it for a second. Of course you have. You do these things probably hundreds of times a day without even realizing it. Shrugging when you're not sure about something, turning your head when you hear your name. It all feels totally automatic. But what's actually making it all happen? Well, it turns out there's a single, highly specialized nerve that's the puppet master behind both of these fundamental actions. And wow, does it have one of the most unusual backstories in all of neuroanatomy. And that nerve is the accessory nerve, also known as cranial nerve number 11. Now, this nerve is a pure specialist. It's what we call a motor nerve, which means its entire job, its whole reason for being, is to make things move. It's not involved in feeling or sensation at all. Its mission is simple: command two very important muscles. And what's really wild is that this whole nerve is dedicated to just two muscles. First, you've got the trapezius. That's the big, powerful muscle that lets you shrug your shoulders. Then there's the sternocleidomastoid. Yeah, I know, it's a mouthful, but that's that thick muscle you can feel on the side of your neck. When it contracts, it turns your head to the opposite side, so your right muscle turns your head left. Kind of cool, right? So far, so good. A nerve for two muscles. Seems pretty straightforward. But this is exactly where the story gets strange. See, the really crucial thing to understand is that this nerve doesn't come from just one place. It actually has two completely separate origins, which for a cranial nerve is incredibly unusual. And this right here really gets to the heart of the puzzle. You've got one part, the cranial root, that comes from the brainstem. You know, the part of the brain that connects down to the spinal cord. But then you've got this other part, the spinal root, that comes from the spinal cord itself, way down in your upper neck. It's just so strange for a single cranial nerve to have two roots that start in totally different places like this. So the big question is, how do these two separate parts ever become one nerve? Well, the spinal root takes a journey that seems to defy all logic. It basically goes the wrong way. Okay, you have to follow this because it is just bizarre. The spinal part of the nerve pops out of the spinal cord in your neck. Then, instead of heading down where it needs to go, it travels up into your skull. It literally ascends through that big hole at the base of your skull, finds its buddy the cranial root, and they fuse together. Then the newly combined nerve turns right back around, exits the skull through a different hole, and travels back down the neck. It goes up, in, and then back out again. A total detour. But the story doesn't even end there. This grand union, this fusion of the two roots after that crazy journey, it's incredibly brief. Almost as soon as they team up and leave the skull, they decide to part ways. That's right. After all that effort to meet up inside the skull, the two roots split up again just moments after they exit. And this separation is what finally reveals the true purpose of each part. So after they split, the cranial root basically merges with the vagus nerve, one of the biggest nerves in the body, and it helps control muscles in your throat. The spinal root, though, that's the one that continues its journey down the neck all by itself to control the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius muscles, yep, the ones for turning your head and shrugging. So here's the big aha moment. When it comes to head and shoulder movement, the spinal root is the accessory nerve. That's the part that does all the work. The cranial part was really just hitching a ride for a bit before it jumped over to help out the vagus nerve. This is why many anatomists now call it the spinal accessory nerve, because that's the part that's actually doing the job we associate with it. So why does all this complex, winding anatomy even matter? Well, it matters because this nerve is surprisingly vulnerable, and when it gets damaged, the effects are really, really noticeable. You know, a super common complaint from patients with accessory nerve damage is just that, a droopy shoulder. And it makes perfect sense, right? The trapezius muscle isn't getting that signal to hold the shoulder up and in place anymore. The signs are pretty clear. A shoulder that droops, a lot of weakness when you try to shrug, and trouble turning your head against any resistance. Sometimes the shoulder blade might stick out in a weird way, a condition called a winged scapula. And what causes all this? Well, because the nerve runs so close to the surface in the neck, it's often damaged accidentally during medical procedures like neck surgery. Of course, any trauma or bad stretch to the neck can easily injure it too. So the next time you shrug your shoulders, just remember the accessory nerve, a strange two-part nerve that takes a bizarre detour through your skull just to make one of life's simplest movements possible. Pretty amazing when you think about it.